We're now live streaming. So welcome everybody to the first Culture Club Talks. And we have 8 panelists with us today that are community leaders from Stanislaus County. And I'm super excited to talk with each of them and hear what they have to say. And I hope that for those catching the live stream, you will send us your comments and your questions and be listening for any takeaways while we're having the conversation. Just a brief introduction. My name is Desiree Cervantes, and I am a designer, artist, magic maker, change maker, creative disruptor, sort of sitting at the intersections of many different things. And I have a curiosity always for truthful conversations, or to hear what people really think and create safe spaces for people to share what that is. Even if it's with disagreement or not in complete alignment, I'd like to hear a diversity of opinions. And the Culture Club Talks is a multimedia storytelling project. At this point, I'm hoping to build it into a larger platform that will be for bold, brave, and creative conversations from the heart. And I'm going to I'll briefly introduce each of the panelists by name, and then I'll let them have a couple minutes to share in response to the prompt. So the topic that we're here to discuss today is what is needed in our community right now from people of color and non-people of color. And I'm specifically interested in prioritizing voices of color because I think that's really important. And also this year, that's one of the things that has been really highlighted in my, what I have perceived is a major need, and especially in our community. So it's a very open-ended prompt. And so I'm really curious to see what each of the panelists will share. And I'm gonna start by introducing Reggie Rucker. And Reggie, if you want to unmute yourself and then give an introduction, and if you would respond to the prompt.
Sure. So first, thank you, Desiree, for putting this together. Yeah, everything that you mentioned is very important that we have these conversations and we represent sort of all the voices in our community. So thank you for doing this. I guess a little bit about me. I spent most of my life in Modesto. I moved here when I was in the 5th grade. And with the exception of going to school at Washington University in St. Louis, I've spent all of my adult life here as well. I spent my early career in the marketing field. I was doing a lot of marketing work for some of the venues, like entertainment venues and events in the Modesto area. And it's funny, as I was thinking about this, I'm getting to the age to where people might not remember some of these things, which is really weird. But so I did a lot of marketing work for the Fat Cat, which is now like Heart and Soul Coffee. X-Fest, big music festival downtown. The Gallo Center, thankfully, is still here. Modesto Symphony, Modesto on Ice in more recent years. And in about 2016, things started to change for me, and I went through this leadership network, new leadership network, funded by the James Irvine Foundation and supported locally by the Stanislaus Community Foundation. And there was something about that experience that really sort of changed my mentality of the type of work that I wanted to do in the community. And it started to pivot a little bit away from some of the just joy and vibrancy of the community, and really more so about how do we connect this community to populations that haven't been connected to it in a lot of ways. In 2020, now things have changed even more to where I started thinking less about how to connect people to the community and the joy and the vibrancy of it. And it really became more about how do we just connect people to basic fairness and justice in the community. And so whether it was joy and vibrancy or justice and equity, I've been doing a lot of work with different leaders in the community and thinking deeply about leadership in the community. And so I know some of the different other panelists on this, I'm going to try not to step on some of their ideas and conversations. But I kind of thought about a few things coming into this. And so one is intellectual rigor over ideological rigor, right? There's a lot of, I think our leaders are doing too much or staking out a position and then finding the right ways to support those positions, as opposed to just doing the work to find the right position to begin with. So I think we need much more of that. Sort of spinning off of that a little bit is humility and ego strength. And it's basically this idea that, once you've established a position, that you don't feel like it represents you to the point that you have to defend it at all costs. And it's okay to sort of say, I was wrong, or this position that I held was wrong, and it doesn't make me wrong or a bad person or whatever. Like, I've learned and I've grown, and that has to be okay. And I think we need to see a lot more of that in our leadership. Third is a fundamental belief in society. And so there's this, we spend too much time today talking about individualism and what individuals can do, and we don't think about what societies collectively can do, and believing that, you know, more so than responsibilities, or more so than rights, we have responsibilities to each other. We belong to each other. We owe each other things. And to be able to call society to that sacrifice, and to understand that it, you know, the way that we think about sacrifice as in giving up something, that's actually the wrong way to think about sacrifice. And sacrifice is actually getting so much more. We need our leaders to be able to call society to that. And so, and like the last thing I'll say, and I got this from a book by Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last, and he called out the idea that the best way, the easiest way, the greatest way to call people to that sense of collectivism is to be incredibly aspirational, to be incredibly ambitious. And if you can get people to stretch outside of what they normally think is possible, they'll realize that the only way that they can do that is with each other and by relying on each other. And so those are like the list of things that I would point out in terms of what I would want to see in our leadership.
Thank you so much, Reggie. I am going to invite Rachel Hernandez to share next. Would you also introduce yourself and then respond to the topic?
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with everyone. I pretty much grew up in Stanislaus County throughout Modesto, Salida area, and now in Riverbank. I went to Davies High, JC, and transferred over to state for my undergrad and for grad school. Through that, I've been working in nonprofits, like Haven Women's Center and now at United Way of Stanislaus County. Currently, I'm running for Riverbank City Council. So, that's taking up time of work. And in terms of, and this is kind of in my face right now in terms of what leadership should be, and really relaying that to the people I talk to in the district. And basically for me, it comes down to empathy and being able to communicate bidirectionally. So I think that with a lot of these ideals about pulling yourself up from your bootstraps, and it's a dog-eat-dog world, and everyone's out for themselves. And I think that's really convoluted the idea of leadership versus management. And that's something that I talk to people a lot, is that they're two distinct things. And just being able to have these conversations within the district and the people that I'm building relationships with here in Riverbank, or I'm talking to by going door to door, that it's really resonating with them. And I think that right now, being a younger person and being first generation, there's no path, there's no defined path for what that looks like, and for how we can really break those barriers. For example, one thing that I really thought of my education as a privilege for me, to be able to communicate and to be able to uplift others. And through a lot of courageous conversations like this one that we're having, I'm also recognizing that it's a form of battling oppression too. So that we're able to uplift ourselves and uplift people who look like us, or who may not have the opportunity to have higher education, or even address the generational trauma that exists with us. So I think viewing empathy and seeing how it's becoming more of a strength rather than a weakness, and really being able to listen without judgment is key. So that's my place in leadership. That's what I feel like a lot of the people here's strengths are too. So yeah, thank you for having this conversation with us.
Thank you. Yes, you're welcome, and thanks for sharing. Juan, will you go next?
Yeah, what's up, y'all? My name's Juan Davies. If you guys don't mind, I'm gonna have a little bit of fun with this. I'm born and raised Modesto. I grew up in West Side, and I think 2 words that would describe me would be multi-dimensional flame. Because I'm a fiery person, and just growing up through the hood and getting a passion for building community through relationships has been one of the greatest things that I've done. I have such a passion for people, and I think that's what really leadership is about. I've been able to create relationship with so many people in regards to leadership, and I just want to shout them out just because I feel that we say people's names when it's too late. And so I want to just give a shout out to Melanie Baru, Omero Mejia, Annalisa Freitas, PJ Golding, Juan Martinez, Jose Gonzalez, Marvin Jacobo, Natalie Perez, Cristina Farias, Ednan Lopez, and Antonio Anaya. And these are all people that I've learned from and like work alongside. And I really think that what I've learned from them about leadership is that you got to fail and forgive yourself. And I'm not afraid to do that. I think I ran for city council back in 2013, and I call it one of my greatest failures because I gained so much knowledge and so much experience, and just really built a network of folks that I can lean on, and learned which folks I couldn't, who called themselves leaders, because there were some toxic folks out there that have this ego. And I think when we talk about empathy and sort of humbleness, that's what I see and what I lean on when I think of a leader. And so what I would say for all leaders is like, you have to fail and forgive yourself, work on yourself. There's folks that exhibit toxic behavior. They hold on to past traumas, insecurities that can show out and can hurt community. I would say for men specifically, we don't need an activist. An activist is someone who tries to lure someone to the bedroom and things of that nature. And I really think that we should be uplifting other leaders, especially women, and we cannot be leaning on them to heal us. So we need to do our own work. And these are all things that I've seen. I would say to people of color, I'm gonna have a little fun with this right here. I'm gonna say stay dangerous, which means be bold. Nipsey Hussle and his song Dedication, I'm gonna recite it for y'all a little bit. It goes, dedication, hard work plus patience, the sum of all my sacrifice. I'm done waiting. I'm done waiting, told you I was done playing. Now you hear what I've been saying, dedication. He later goes on to say, lock us behind gates, you can't tame us. Used to stay safe, but now it's stay dangerous. Because ain't no point in playing defense. That's why I dove off the deep end with no life jacket. And mainly because we need representation in all areas, all sectors of our city life and entertainment. I mean, leaders in transportation, business, healthcare, mental health, all of it. I'm going to say to non-POC, step up and step back. Far too often, I think that there's folks that step into places that they shouldn't be giving their voice to. And I really think that we should be leaning on the folks with their own expertise or finding folks with expertise. If you don't know someone, find somebody. Reach out to a network, build a new network. And also question your peers for non-POC. Question them. How are your peers supporting equity? And who are we accountable to? And so I think that would wrap it up for me. As a leader I would claim the title of leader for like the last 12 years. Those are the things that I look about for leadership from both, and that's what we need.
Thank you, Juan. I'm taking copious notes and appreciating stay dangerous and be bold. Abel, would you like to share?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks once again for inviting me to be here. It's really exciting for me. I was saying before we went on Facebook Live how I've just been looking forward to being part of this conversation and meeting other leaders around our community for this whole weekend and pretty much the last couple of weeks when we started talking about putting this together and when I was invited. So thank you again for putting this on. My name again is Abel Maestas, and I am currently an instructional coach. I've been an educator and teacher, high school teacher for over 20 years. I grew up in Delano, California. That's in just down south from here. My family all work in the fields. My parents didn't work in the fields. My grandmother worked in the grape fields until she was in her 60s. So I grew up in, child of farm labor. My aunts and uncles, a lot of them all worked in there. And so I saw a lot of my friends from families of farm laborers. So that's kind of like the world that I came from and grew up from. Bounced around all over the place, went to college at Cal Poly, first of my family to go to college. And after being part of the educational system and teaching and stuff, I really firmly believe that at least my calling was getting kids to go to college and stop the cycle of poverty. And that's always been kind of like my call, was to stop the cycle of poverty. Because if I'm a bit of a data guy, and I go back to something that Reggie said about leaders going and looking for not necessarily data, but looking for information to make decisions, and not looking for the information to back up what they already believe. So, as I kind of went through my own life, I saw how much change education can do for our society, and really like I said before, to break the cycle of poverty. I look back at my own life, and now my kids hear all the time, when you go to college, when you do this, when you do that. But when I was growing up, it wasn't always that. It was education is important. Education is important. So I made it important, but I had to make that decision to go on to college on my own. And my parents didn't go to college. I had to find those mentors, and I had to find those people in my life that had gone to college to get that information. So I wanted to be that mentor for a lot of my students and get them to college, to be the first to go to college, because when they do that, they break that cycle. And now every generation after them has a higher likelihood of going to college, a higher likelihood of having a higher paying job. And that breaks that also breaks that school to prison cycle that we see. Also, education, in my opinion, is like the foundation for just a better community, a better society, a better life for all of us. And so I try to spread that message to my students as much as possible. You got to work hard because you want it, but also because it will make us all better. And so when I was reflecting on the whole thoughts of, what should our leaders do, especially those that are in our community, but people of color and non-people of color. And there were really two things that stuck out in my mind most prevalent. The first is going back to what Rachel said, and I thought this is really empathy. And this comes from, I was having this conversation with my son the other day about, he sees the things that are happening on the news, and he gets a little worried because, there are people being, abused by certain other people. And I said, well, buddy, you probably won't have that issue because, and he kind of understood his privilege. But he also was shocked that people from, like his grandparents could possibly fall into those situations. And so he was a little nervous, but I wanted to get him to understand that, just because you have a certain privilege, you have to understand where the other person's coming from and where their life has taken them. Because if we don't have that empathy and that ability to go, oh yeah, I do understand the pain that that puts you through. Then we start to build up those walls, and we don't start to move forward. We just keep staying back and back and back. And in order to move forward, we need to build that up. So the empathy was kind of my biggest thing. And I'm running out of time. So I'm really just going to say that the last thing that I really think is important, what Juan said, and you see it in the picture behind me, is that failure is the key to moving forward. So the more you learn from failure, the more you can move forward. And I think that our leaders need that as well in our community. I got a lot to say, but I'll say it later. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Abel. Karhla.
Wow, so much to digest and acknowledge. I just want to say thank you so much, Desiree, for putting this together and having a very diverse group of people who have like a genuine heart for the community. My name is Karhla Denise Davies. I'm first generation, born and bred from Houston, California. My parents were undocumented farm workers, and first in my family to go to college. Like so many, I think so many in our community, I don't think that my story is different than many. I think that there's many in our community that are first generation that are going to school, who still have parents working in the factories and in the farms. And we need to acknowledge that because as much as we progress, and I agree with Abel, education to me is the way out. I went to Stan State 20 years ago. I graduated, which is crazy to me. But not much I work there now, and not much has really changed. The students are predominantly people of color, predominantly women, and they graduate with very little access to jobs. And obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's a little hard, but it breaks my heart to be like, okay, they have an education, but they don't have the community connections. And so as a leader, and owning that word is a big deal for me. It feels like a imposter syndrome a little bit. And if you don't know what that is, like Google it. But basically I feel like I'm never worthy enough. My thoughts, there's always someone that has more education than me or has more life experience. So I struggle with that on my own, but I believe in being authentic and real and myself. And that's taken a long time. That's taken 44 years to be like, it's okay, I am a leader. People do listen. I am an influencer, and I'm a community hustler. And what that means is that I love this community. I'm from here. I want to bring other people that nobody knows about. There's youth, there's just so much happening. And for me, it's really making those connections outside of my social circle or sphere of influence, because it's not about me or who I know or my name. It's really if I can connect them to someone like Juan or Rachel or Kate, and then they're like, yeah, I'll totally talk to them. That's how I have a seat at this table, is by being brave and courageous and putting myself in situations that I didn't belong, that I wasn't, I'm going to say it, the rich kid, the rich white kid with roots in this community. Like my roots are here, but not an elite root. So I'm trying to change the dynamic from the elite to the awesome, right? The awesome and the authentic. And there's so many of us that really have the same vision, regardless of skin color, regardless of our ethnicity. What I love that I'm seeing is that there is change, that, people are running for office that weren't running when Juan ran in 2013. Obviously it's a political year. We have, who knows who will be president, but I think now is a time, right? It's COVID. This is a time to show up. Black Lives Matter. All the social justice, it's sort of, it's happening for a reason. And now is a time to show up authentically. I think what our leadership needs is, one, to be accessible, and outside of our comfort zones. So many, you're in leadership and you start talking big words, we're going to pivot to do this, it's about sustainable and all that. And the reality is that most people in our community could care less about those words and using words like that. So I think you need to be accessible and acknowledge that words also create barriers for people and for people in our communities that don't speak English, whether that's, speaking Spanish or Hmong. We have to make things easy and attainable. Two is representation. There needs to be representation of really the people from the communities. It can't be the same, which I feel like I'm part of the same, the same people. I guess as an adult, I think I forgot this. I was having conversation with Lindsey Bird, who's going to be on soon. Just I'm like, oh, I know those people, I know them. And I'm like, oh, I'm one of those people. And so that's why I'm like, I'm always trying to connect with other people that I don't know, because again, we multiply by helping others rise. And that's what I'm about. And then 3 is our leaders need to be uncomfortable. They need to go to South Modesto. They need to go to the airport. They need to go get tacos off Crow's Landing. That's where our real, and West Modesto, all the underserved communities, you have to go there. You have to feel uncomfortable so that you can acknowledge like what life is like outside of Del Rio, outside of White Cliff, right? Outside of these communities that are established, that nothing's wrong with that. But that isn't like the normal for so many in our community. So I think, again, accessibility, representation, and leaders that are uncomfortable and willing to kind of put it all on the line, because there's always a job, there's always more, but now is a time to rise and help others in our community elevate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karhla. Jocelyn, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Jocelyn Cooper. And again, I want to, like everyone, I want to thank you for having me as being one of the panelists here and among so many great people. I start off, I guess I would say, I'm an advocate for social justice, education, racial justice, any kind of justice, period. You can find me normally on a committee or part of a committee that wants to make a change. My story, I guess because of being older here, my reflection starts back to when I was younger, where I was able to witness racial injustice, not in the way that most people do when they live in the South, but through my parents and relatives. I was able to see my father, who was in the military, and the struggles that he had being only allowed to be a cook on a submarine, but yet had to learn all the training, all the maneuvers to be active and ready for combat duty. I'm thankful for my mother, who's benevolent, who believed in everyone was good. There was no bad person, and didn't believe in hate at all unless that person gave you a reason to hate. And my uncle, who was a porter on the trains, who had a degree from Xavier University, but couldn't make a decent living with his degree other than going and being a porter, because at that point, that time, that's where the money was. And then I have another cousin who managed to be a teacher, a counselor, and a principal of an all-Black school in high school in Galveston, Texas. And then, as I was thinking through my career, because I started looking at what was leadership like. And when I started in management, or so-called being promoted to supervisor and manager level, it was the current culture for leadership was authoritative. No one had a voice and no one dared speak up. And of course, I didn't do well in that kind of an atmosphere. So, but however, a white supervisor took me under her wing, and from there, my career started, and I became a supervisor and manager with the telephone company until I retired. Then, and I spent most of my time, and it's the reason why I believe in 3, which is being used a lot now, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I believe in those 3 things because with my basic background in schools, where I was the only Black, or within maybe not more than 3 more Black children in the schools, I understood where diversity was not there. I understood not having inclusion when you weren't invited to birthday parties or in the homes of the students or in the workforce. So those 3 things, diversity, inclusion, and equity, have always meant a lot to me. Then I think what's important is that well, let me just say this. In my culture, when I was growing up, we were told to don't make waves, be quiet. If you see racism, don't necessarily speak out. And I would have to say, based on where we are today in COVID-19 And with racial injustice, that's not the way to be. I think we need to follow the quotes of John Lewis, good trouble. There's not anything wrong with good trouble. And if you see something, say something. I think we're at that point now where when we experience any sort of racism and injustice, we need to speak up. And how do we go about that in 2020? I think you need to raise your voice. Don't be afraid to speak up. And start conversations wherever you are. If you're in a nonprofit or you're in a corporation, you need to start working or talking with other people who can make a difference and who can go and start to try to implement something like this, the cultural talk, where you can bring people in and they can share their stories and learn the similarities and their differences, because you can't overcome anything in silence. You have to be willing to understand that speaking out, you could also lose your job, but sometimes you have to think, is it worth it? And if it is, then I think you need to move forward. And I can explain an example of that. As I ended my career, evaluations started to be based on subjectivity, and they wanted to take the ability of the managers to rate their people and make changes to those and make people that were satisfactory unsatisfactory. And at that point, I said, I cannot do that. I don't have a problem if it's, honesty, but I will not rate a person lower than they were. So wrapping it up, I think the leadership qualities, characteristics that I see, being adaptable to change, collaboration, empathy, building relationships, and trying to get in within your company or your nonprofit goals or metrics that have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn, so much for sharing that. Lindsey?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsey Bird, and I am a Modesto native, born and raised here, came up through public schools. I returned after, I think many of us, when we leave for college, say we're not coming back, and my heart brought me back to Modesto in the Central Valley, where I became a high school teacher. So for 18 years, I was a high school teacher for Modesto City Schools and was initially assigned sections for English learners, which quickly became my passion. I was able to advocate for my students within the system and help contribute to a special program called the Language Institute. So that served immigrant, refugee, and asylum-seeking students from all over the world. We were actually caught off guard at the diversity we have here in the Central Valley. We really are a mirror of international events. Whether that be war refugees, asylum seekers from Central America, each student bringing, of course, that not only the beauty of their culture, but also the trauma of why they had to leave. So what my colleagues and I discovered was there were some unintentional barriers to their success, which we identified, and we started to lobby on their behalf. Unfortunately, what we found was there wasn't a lot of leadership capability in terms of being willing to react to the barriers that we presented. So we had students doing amazing things. We had students going from having no education and not even knowing the Roman alphabet when they arrived, going off to be accepted to a four-year university 4 years later. So what we hope is that those amazing human living examples of what is possible in education would really speak to the importance of why culturally responsive policy is important in community, especially in education. And when we hit walls here locally, we even took our fight all the way to Sacramento. We had a bill written to try to address one of the barriers that we faced here, which was the age of our students and how long they would have access to education. Whether I was advocating in Sacramento or even all the way to Washington, D.C., I was always told education is local, and so the solutions are local as well. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get the policy that we needed to maintain the success that our program had achieved. At the height of the Language Institute, we had 90% of our graduates going off into higher education. So it was sad that that wasn't immortalized, but it taught me some really important lessons, and that was the value of community and the need for culturally responsive local elected officials. I know I never really thought much about what a school board member did when I was growing up. I didn't ever have a situation where I needed to lobby the board. But me giving voice to my students and their needs show me how important local leaders are. So actually, when the Language Institute was dissolved and everything but name, I made the personal decision to step away from Modesto City Schools because I didn't want to take place in the oppression that I saw happening with my students. And since then, I've also made an additional decision. I'm hoping to, help other schools consult and help their immigrants that are new to their community and equitable pathways. But I also wanted to be part of the change, which is why I'm also running for the Yosemite Community College District Area 6. I want to take the experiences that I've had from not only just my students, but I created a network of allies here and realized when I worked with the advocates who represented the African American community, or we connected with the Southeast Asian community who were the refugees of 20, 30 years ago, even though what our students needed was different, the culture which held us back from our full potential was the same. And so all of the experiences that I've had, not only as a parent, as a Modesto native, as an educator, as an advocate, but also what I've learned from fellow advocates of other demographics. I want to take that and hopefully represent Modesto Junior College at the board level, because I know we have a lot of data that suggests that we have a lot of opportunity for growth in education. I don't know about all of you, but I'm personally so sad every time I open up that Forbes list every 5 years and see that we're one of the least educated cities. I firmly believe that does not represent a low quality of student. What that represents is an opportunity for innovation and for vision. Demographics are not destiny. My students prove that. If we create culturally competent systems and policy, and then give the people in our community the tools they need, the wraparound services through education, I think that we can not only get off of the least educated list, but really meet our full potential as a community. So as a consultant and as a political candidate, that's what I hope to do so that we can make Modesto the best version of itself.
Thank you, Lindsey. And Kate.
Thanks, Desiree. What a sort of privilege to go last after listening to all of you. I feel like all I'd really like to do is just amplify and lift up what's been said, because it's so aligned with what's in my heart right now. I'll share a little bit about myself, and then yeah, I just would like to echo some of what's already been brought up. So my name's Kate Trumpeter. I'm a local leadership and organizational coach. I was born and raised in Modesto. Karhla, I was the rich white kid that had roots in the ground when I was born. And I have always been very, very grateful for that. And also very grateful to have parents who helped me to see what a gift it was that I came into the world with a lot. And so I'm just very aware, as I sort of officially moved into work around equity and privilege, that my parents had already done so much work to help me understand all that was possible because of where I was positioned, and what it meant for me to be positioned in the way that I was. So I also am Jewish, and there's something really present for me about tikkun olam, which is the Jewish sort of mitzvah or good deed or commandment to do acts of kindness and heal the world. I think that that's had a lot to do with why I've chosen to do the work that I do. The personal stuff, I'm married to a really cool guy named Dave. I've got 3 kids. I've helped to raise my bonus kids who are now in their 20s, and I have a 7-year-old, and I consider it a real privilege and responsibility to be raising kids in the same way that my parents have raised me, because they were also born with their roots in the ground with quite a bit of privilege. So this question that Desiree's asked us to answer is big for me because I've centered my work around it. So it comes up for me all the time. And it also feels like whenever our community or the world or me personally or my friends are navigating some sort of complexity, something's coming up that we can't really respond to with our habitual ways, it always comes back to leadership for me. And when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking about, we can talk about people who are in positions of authority, I think that's a very traditional way to think about leadership, as Jocelyn pointed to. But I think leadership's the capacity of any person, regardless of their position, where they're born, how old they are, and that it's up to many of us, especially people like me, white people who are positioned in a system to have influence and create change, to make sure that there's room for that. I think Juan or somebody said something about stepping up and stepping back, and I feel like that's a real responsibility that I have in the places where I'm positioned to do the most good. I also think about leadership, like what's required of us right now, as being about three primary things. And I really, like Abel, I could say a lot right now, but I'm going to try to narrow it down to three things. The first thing is about the systems. I think our leaders have to be able, Reggie started pointing to this, our leaders need to be able to see how connected we are to one another, that the only real distance between any of us is the distance we impose, is really important for our leaders to get. And also, I mean, you can hardly deny in the middle of a pandemic how connected all of us are, the choices that we make, how they influence and impact other people. And when I think about systems, I think about policy, I think about the way resources flow, that those laws that are in place that are inequitable or create, systemic racism, for instance, those are really important things for us to address. And I think it's really important for us to be addressing these mental, like the mindsets, the hearts and minds of people, because I think it takes both to make change, and our leaders need to get that. They need to get that policy is really important and hearts and minds are really important, and we need to be doing the work in both places. On the individual level, I just can't say enough about how important I think self-awareness is. Like one person's ability to reflect on their motives, their interests, how the stories and opinions they've generated have been created by their experiences. Like creating that time and space for reflection is part of, I think, one of my biggest responsibilities professionally, which is to remind folks that we need to be investigating ourselves, certainly before we start investigating anybody else. That is a primary responsibility, and I think function of being a human being, that like, if you aren't creating, and we all have the ability to do that. You do not need to go to a training to be self-aware. You just have to ask yourself the right questions. And I think then, only then, can we really start to take responsibility for the impact that we have on other people, which all of us do. And then the last thing I want to lift up, which all of you have given voice to, is empathy and curiosity. When somebody tells you they're in pain, believe them. Like, it's our responsibility to be able to make it okay and true that another person's experience is the experience that they're having. And the thing that makes it hardest for me to see any of you or anyone else in the world is the me that I have in my head, or I'm sorry, the you that I have in my head, right? Like, I've made up a story about who you are and what your life has been like and what's right and what's wrong. And when I can step back and come from a place of empathy and curiosity and actually listen to someone's story and allow that to be true, and not to displace my own truth, but both of those things can be true at the same time, and that we can start to have empathy for one another, like that to me is when real change happens. So being empathetic, self-aware, curious, being good listeners, getting that our destiny is tied together. And then I know my time's up, but the last thing I just want to say is, like, I need our leaders to stay in this conversation. And I think especially for white people, it's going to be too easy for us to stop having this conversation because it won't feel urgent. We cannot have this conversation when we're in a crisis only. It has to happen all the time.
Thank you so much. I'm taking notes and I'm listening to all the quotable things you guys have said, which I'm like imagining how to turn into memes after this call. But I'm curious if anybody has a burning desire to follow up to anything that's been shared, and maybe take 2 to 3 minutes to offer an additional reflection, and just unmute yourself and come on and do that. We have about 20 to 30 minutes for reflections, and I haven't seen any questions come through in the chat from Facebook Live, so we can just sort of take the conversation deeper.
Yeah, I'll start, and sort of with a little bit of an echo to Kate and Jocelyn, and this idea around we look to leaders, right? Like we look to other people in times of crisis or in times of need. We're always looking to others who are higher up than us, to to solve our problems. And it's incredibly important. It's critical that all of the things that we demand of our leaders, we demand of ourselves. I don't know where this quote comes from, but it's the idea that you get the leaders you deserve. And especially elected officials in a democracy, like, they're not there by accident. They're there because collectively, and we can go through the history of sort of how laws have kept people out of the democratic process and gerrymandering, like all the things. Certainly talk about all that. And there are plenty of people who had access that make terrible decisions about who our leaders are. And that's not on our leaders, that's on us, again, collectively, who elected them. It's on us for prioritizing entertainment or leisure or whatever it is that we're prioritizing over civic engagement, over really paying attention to who's running for office and who we should be voting for. We at a certain point we have to, Kate mentioned this as well, sort of just look at ourselves and look at how we're contributing or not contributing to the type of society that we want to see. So it's not just a conversation about leaders and leadership in the traditional sense, but it's about how we act in our everyday lives as social leaders.
Yeah, I'd like to echo a lot of that too, and it kind of comes back to what Kate was saying about leaders aren't always those that are in authority, and Karhla had mentioned about the feeling of not knowing if you are, like, I have that same feeling. Am I really a leader? Do I really deserve to be part of this table and this conversation right now? I mean, I've done a lot. I think I've done a lot. I feel like I've influenced a lot of young adults. But where is my place at the table right now? Am I even worthy of being here? And I think when we get to a point where we're like, yeah, you know what? We have to step up too. Like, I reflect on the death of Chadwick Boseman this last couple of weeks, and many people don't understand what he meant as that. I mean, just even playing the character of Black Panther, what that meant to so many kids, and understanding that was he, by portraying this character the way that he did, he's influenced so many lives. And that was a leader in so many ways. And so when I made the decision this last year over the summer to run for Modesto City Schools School Board, it was the same situation. I talked to my wife and I said, am I really ready for this? This is pretty big. And she just said, yeah, you're ready. Like, you're ready to do this. And so sometimes it takes others to help us to realize that, yeah, we're ready for that push to not only to be in that authority position, but to take the leadership that we've already built and to be part of that piece. And I think when we get a lot more representation and a lot more people from our community to say, you know what, you have that in you to be a leader. You are a leader. You are inspiring other people, and you should be part of this table. And we're going to have a lot more change in our community when we have more voices to be part of that table.
I like to.
I think I
Oh,
okay.
It's funny. I think I just have a question for like the rest of the panel. This is like, I'm sitting here and I'm seeing all of you and I'm like, oh, I love that everyone's so incredible and good people. And then I started thinking like we're not translating in Spanish, right? We're not, again, we're not being accessible to the communities that really want to see people like us at the table. And I don't have a solution for that, but it's always in my mind that, like my parents, like, they don't care what award I have or who I am. Like they're working class people. They're just, trying to survive, and they don't have time for leadership. They have to work. So I'm just curious to hear like thoughts on that, of like how do we bridge that gap? and what does that look like? And I don't have an answer. I really am just sort of like thinking out loud.
I'm glad you asked that first, because I was totally going to go in that line too. And even going to have the conversations here in Riverbank is 60% Latino. And one conversation I had with a man who is a resident who cannot vote, but just talking to him in Spanish, and him feeling the comfort of, okay, well, she's a leader, she must know. Do you know where I can go to get citizenship help? Do you know where, you know, I'm low income, where can I get help? And just jotting down real quick, just from the top of my head, like who I know or what organizations I know. I think it's true. I love that everyone said that leaders can be anyone, and anyone that can help guide or bridge gaps. And even right now, as we're having these terms in our face of BIPOC, of cultural competency, and all of that, being able to educate on what that means and what it means as a leader and bridging the gap. So I think my input to your question is really challenging elected officials currently, or people who are running, to be inclusive, because some of them don't have this cultural background of, you know, or even Spanish speaking. So I think adding a little bit of pressure to these people, or to us, because, you know, it can happen. We can start bridging those gaps.
Yeah, there's something that just came up oh, Jocelyn, I'm sorry. Do you
No,
want
go
to
ahead. I can wait.
Well, very, very briefly, I was just thinking about your question, Karhla, and thinking a little bit too about this idea around leaders needing to be empathetic and curious. I was in a recent conversation with someone who runs an organization locally who was basically saying, like, I don't understand why, and then insert community X isn't coming to us. But they had no sort of real curiosity for finding out why, for doing the research, asking the right questions. They just wanted to keep pushing harder in all the same ways that they've always pushed, and expecting a different result. And I think that to me comes back to, like, our leaders asking themselves, who do I need to talk to, who has the lived experience, right? Who can tell me, who's, this leader's willing to be influenced by what they hear from someone, right? Tell me what I need to be doing differently to meet their needs. That comes up for me.
Yeah, well, for me, every time I think of a meeting, I think about how do I reach all the different ethnic groups. And just for instance, I'm having a parent forum, and the vehicle we're using, I couldn't get Spanish interpreted. And so, it's something I wanted. I wanted sign language. I couldn't do that. So sometimes we're handicapped by technology. But I think that the main thing for me is the diversity that exists in Modesto, that I see too much silo. Somehow we have to bring others to the table. And when we are doing meetings, we need to think about who else can we invite that's not like us. And hopefully that will start to boomerang. And because if you really, from the outside looking in from Modesto, you would not believe where this city is diverse. And I think that's a shame, because there's a lot of people that could bring a lot to this table if we were more open.
I'd like to add something in terms of a lot of the comments that were made, regarding translation and access. And when Kate mentioned, a nonprofit wondering where a community is, but not really doing anything to find out why. We advocated in education, for meaningful literacy. And a lot of times we got brushed back. Well, not everybody is going to go off to higher education, associating literacy with just a 4-year degree. And what we always argued is literacy is access to the American dream, and literacy is participation in the democratic process. So we weren't saying that we wanted our students to be literate because they had to go to college. Obviously, there's dignity and all kinds of work that doesn't require a college degree. But if we let students enter the community, not only without the literacy, but without the knowledge of, okay, if I have a problem, this is the meeting I go to, and this is how I express myself, or this is who I contact if I have a question. And not only knowing who to contact or what meeting to attend, but having the confidence to do that, that's really important in our community. And so, making sure that people are not just literate, but also empowered to where they do want to be part of the solution. And so not necessarily always having the solutions come from the leaders, whether they be elected or community leaders, but having each person feel leadership within themselves, I think is something that we could do better in our community by it's starting in the schools, of course, empowering our students. And then that's an investment that goes on for generations, because once you're literate, once you're empowered, you teach that to your children. So that's part of the community change that I would love to see happen here.
Agreed.
I want to chime in real quick and just say that, like, I believe education sometimes comes next after empowerment. Because I've seen people that have gone through high school and then all of a sudden have met certain people in their lives that mentored them in such a way or taught them something, and then they were empowered to get educated. And then it awakens them to start making social change, start doing these rallies, start participating in the process. And so to that, I will also want to say that, like, we need to be focusing on like some of the issues like housing, transportation, mental health. Like, mental health services are so critical, and we lack so much here in Modesto and Stanislaus County. Like, I can't stress that enough. And so I think those are really the issues that I want to focus on going forward. Currently, you know, I'm starting a business with 4 other folks, and we want to implement social change through entrepreneurship. Because as someone who's grinded to get where like the little bit of power that I've had right now, as an individual living in Modesto, I've always been limited by the resources, right? So like I give and I give and I give until I'm empty, but who's feeding me? And so unfortunately, like my last nonprofit job, I wanted a raise. I was doing more work than I could. I told them about diversity, inclusion, equity work, and still, one, like, I'm sorry, we can't do that for you right now. So it's one of these things, like, as a person, as a biracial person of color, you know, doesn't matter what my experience is sometimes, how in line I am with your vision sometimes it comes down to dollars. And so I really want to give people the opportunity to create their own businesses and create social change in that way, because once they are fed, once they are clothed and housed, they can participate in democracy. They can participate in educating themselves. And so that's really the venue that I want to take. And I really think that we should be focusing on being able to get dollars in people's pockets.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's it. That's the power in that is amplified because we live in a capitalist society. Like, who has the money is going to be who has the most influence over where things go. And, you know, I'm thinking back to, it's bugged me to no end, you know, Lindsey, when you were telling the story around, you know, not every kid needs to, or is going to go to college, so let's find a different pathway for them. And I love that. And who are the ones that's always saying who is or isn't going to be going to college? Like, these white men who say this would never let their kids not go to college, would never let their kids find some alternative path to the marketplace, right? But for the other people's kids, that's okay, and we need to find a path for them, right? And so it's not about the pathway and what's appropriate for students and their education and for literacy, but it's about who's saying it. And when you pay attention to that, it makes it abundantly clear that my kids are going to go to college so they can have all the money in the world, to have all the power and influence in the world, and other people's kids just need to find a path to make enough to make my life better, right? And that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Yeah. Wealth and education drives this country. And so until we have that, we have to keep pushing for that. We have to keep pushing for that power and for that wealth. So that's truly important.
Yeah, Reggie, what you said is so incredibly true, because I experienced that firsthand, you know, because sometimes people would say to me what they probably wouldn't say to you, in terms of me advocating for my students. And they were, a lot of the barriers that we faced were us having the audacity to suggest that these new immigrants and refugees should go to higher education. And it was even suggested that we were disrupting the local economy, because the powers that be at that time, who were, you know, white administrators, saw my students as a pipeline to, you know, working the fields in agriculture. And who were we to mess with, you know, the establishment? So what you're saying is absolutely 100% true. We have to address the fact that higher education, there's a worthiness that's been associated with certain demographics. And you're right, we have to advocate and lobby for the children of others and their opportunity and their access as much as we would for ourselves.
Yes.
And I think that there's a connection between what Reggie said and what Juan said, because that systemic built-in, I mean, I'm going to go far as saying that systemic built-in racism in there helps to keep students from being empowered when they're younger. How beautiful would it be if they were empowered from the get-go and they had people that believed in them all the way through? Then they wouldn't have to struggle through education and then decide, oh, I finally found the mentor. Not saying that was a bad pathway, but if we're able to find the ways to empower kids early, and they become leaders within their schools, and they become leaders before, and they get out and still and become those leaders, you know, later on in their community. I just think there's so much more we can do about changing that early on, because I mean, Reggie, I think you're completely, you hit it right on, you hit the nail right on the head right there. I felt the same way, you know. It's like, oh yeah, you know, your family, your dad's a janitor, a bus driver, you know, what do you about think of this? What do you think of this? And it's like, well, who's going to tell me about college? Like, who's going to be telling me about the colleges? I got to do that on my own. So that's where those mentorships are so important at a young age, I feel. And I think we have the opportunity and the obligation to do that for all of our kids. It's an equity issue. I really believe that.
We have one question from Facebook. There's a comment and a question, so I'll address the comment, which is talking about needing to be considering yourself experienced before you can be a leader. So the comment comes from Rebecca Ortega Harrington, who says, as a member of the community, I saw an opportunity to encourage a new person to run for office. I was tired of seeing the status quo and looked to a younger, more open-minded and out-of-the-box thinker. I do not agree with the thought process that you need to be more experienced. You get your experience by stepping up and saying you're willing to accept the challenge. So that, I'm just going to share that. And then the question we have from Karina Waragwai, who I hope I'm getting that correct. Jocelyn, how do you feel about the achievements we have made as a city, and where do you see a lack of action from the city? And I'm thinking the city government is the rest.
I'm not very high on government right now, but unfortunately, I think the government is failing us at local level, state level, and government level. We do not have to have all of these inequities if we had leaders in there who cared about everyone and led at leadership that took in consideration everyone and not just certain groups. So I believe strongly that we have to make that change, and I have to go along with the other panelists. We have to become involved in our government at all levels. We have to make sure that we query our candidates and make sure that they're going to represent everybody and that they are looking and working and trying to solve the issues of today that we have. And if we don't do that, we're just going down a rabbit hole.
Desiree, can I say something to what Rebecca Harrington put in? Because it's just, it really is making me think of what Juan said about the stepping up and stepping back. And Jocelyn, you're talking about this too, like our leadership. We've had young people who have attempted to step up and into local government, which we all know Juan is one of them. And I think that there's also, I would call out to our leaders that at some point there's a need for you to step back, and that it's not as simple as stepping up and stepping back. Like there's an investment that needs to be made in growing leadership, you know, formal authority leadership in our local government system. And we need folks who are in those positions, maybe not all of them, to be doing that actively. And from a place of like, no, that's leadership, in my opinion, that like they are there, they have the power and the authority, and they have the opportunity to influence what this local government looks like. They need to step back and then reach in and pull people up and get them ready if they don't think they're ready. But I have that conversation also with nonprofit boards all the time. They're always upset that they don't have young people on their boards, but they get young people and then they say they're not ready. Like, you have to make the investment.
Yeah, I can give you an example. When I was younger, I moved into a department that actually I called it where they sent older women to die because they no longer cared about what they had to say. But the problem that I saw, though, was that being older, they didn't want to listen to anyone else. They felt that they knew the answers, and therefore, you're young, don't tell me what to do. And I have made that a purpose in my life, that I am open to anybody's ideas, and I don't care what age they are. And I think that older people need to learn that, and they need to accept it, and they need to allow younger people to have a voice. If we don't, we're not going to make it, because we can see right now the older people are doing nothing for us.
I just want to like talk a little bit about that, because I think it's about power, right? I mean, that's what we're really talking about, right? It's like we all have power, we have privilege. We're on this call, we're talking about leadership. But I think the old guard, or you know, whatever we want to call it, the one percenters, the people in power, is they want to maintain power. And the way that you maintain that is by making sure that people don't have access to education, they don't have access to the things that they need, food and shelter, that they're, you know, and I think that's like the real at the heart of specifically Stanislaus County, the Central Valley in general, is the power is an ag, and it's old money, and it's hard, you know, not that they're bad people or anything like that, but it's like we've worked hard to be in power, and we're not going to let go of that power. But, you know, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, Modesto, Stanislaus County we're not in 1957 anymore, right? We have people coming from the Bay Area, which bring culture and life. And I think much of our leadership is still thinking that we're Modesto 1957, where it's all orchards and it's all this stuff. And like, they want to keep it like that. And the reality is, like, there are lots of people that don't want to keep it like that, right? I love ag. Like, it's obviously a source of income for so many in our community, whether they're the farmer or the farm worker. But culture and vibrancy is more than just maintaining power, right? It's again providing access to be like, let's try new things. Let's bring First Friday to the market. Like, I mean, let's really like step outside our comfort and acknowledge that we are no longer a community of white people and only Latino people, right? We have our Black brothers and sisters, we have Asian. I mean, we have like, it's so diverse. And so I think, you know, what I'm most excited about is the people that I see running for office, that, you know, they have those opinions. They're like, yeah, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to talk. And for anyone that's watching, whether or not, I just posted this, whether or not you believe in voting, it really does matter. Because those are the people, they're either going to maintain the power, or you're going to have new people that have a different thought, that are accessible to you, that really care about growing community, growing leadership, and changing the power dynamics. So, you know, I think in the end, that's what it comes down to. Like, you have power, you want to maintain it. It's ego, you know, it is what it is, and it's human nature. So I love that. I think everyone on this panel, we all have ego to an extent, right? But we're like, yeah, you can call me. Yeah, you can text me. Sure, I'll do that for you. And I think that's how you build community, is by getting to know other people that are willing to support you, to be a mentor, to be like, I have no idea how to start a business, and that they'll say yes to go to lunch with you, to be like, here's how I did it, you know? So I think, again, I think we're talking power dynamics.
I think it's important to not be afraid of the unknown either. Go ahead, if you have something that you want to do, take that chance. That's real important.
There are just a couple of comments and questions that I wanted to share from the Facebook. We have a follow-up to a comment that Abel made from Milana Cook. She says that, I know leaders are busy, but I do believe that leaders need to be the initiator. First generation students do not know how to begin to broach that relationship, not out of want, but because there has been no one in their family to model this. I wonder if anyone knows if there is already such a group in the Central Valley.
I don't know. I don't know of the groups out there that provide mentorship. I do know the school that I work, Ceres High School, has a really well, I used to work at Ceres High School, but the district has a really great what they call academy program, and part of that academy program, mostly for underserved populations, focuses on mentorship. So these kids get mentors as they come in as freshmen, and they stay with each other all the way till they graduate as seniors. So they have that within and embedded in that. And I would love to see more mentorship programs like that embedded in our schools as you know, as they are, so we can provide that to our students. Aside from that, because that's the school initiating the process and finding the students out there and getting them the mentorship they need without them having to reach out to do that. Sometimes it's just just the educators themselves. I had a student one time, and I told the student, when those times when you don't believe in yourself, you at least have one other, you do have one person that believes in you, and that's me. So if you need anything, just know, those times, those days that you're not feeling well, or you don't think you have anybody in your back, you've got me to support you, and I believe in you. And that was enough that the student was like, yeah, anytime they had a trouble, they knew they had someone that was on their side. So finding those ways to connect to students like that is not only, teachers have a lot of students, but we have other people in our community that can be part of that process. And I think bringing them in to work together with our schools will be one step, and then work together with some other programs that might already exist. And you know what, even make these programs. If they're not out there in Modesto, we need to start with these programs, because that's how we're going to help our community and help our kids and change a lot of what goes on around here. So if it doesn't exist already, we should have something that does.
I want to chime in. I want to share with y'all, I grew up without a father. And so I think one of the ways I adapted to not having a father was looking towards other individuals. And I may not have developed a formal relationship with them as a mentor, but I watched them and I learned, how it is that they succeeded at whatever it is that I want to develop. So if they were a teacher, how did they communicate? How did they resolve an issue? If I was in a small group, how did they organize a small group? What was the dynamics? And everything I just pulled and created a toolbox from just watching. Secondly, I want to say, I'll throw my hat out there and say I'm a mentor. And also a program out there that is available now. I think that they're still taking applicants. Is a program that I co-developed with a friend, Anna Talavera. It's called Activate. And so it's a social justice, environmental justice based program that takes youth from the region, and it pays them a stipend. It gets them connected to nature and also lets them recreate. And so that was something it's changed now because of COVID. And Anna now is leading that program. She's a wonderful mentor. She also is a mentor in the community for other young women in the community that are going to school, first generation college students. So I would also reach out to her as well. you can reach out to me for more information.
I'd like to just add a very quick thing to that I know that through City Ministry Networks, there's another sort of young adult youth power building. So you can, there's a project going on there, others may know more about, but you can look that up. And I just wanted to add that there's something called the Cradle to Career Partnership, which has been working across Stanislaus County on a lot of different things. But one of the things that they've identified in the last couple years is the lack of youth power building work going on in our community. So there is a group, you can look Cradle to Career up online as another way to get some information about some of the work that's being done to try to catalyze more of that power building work.
I want to interject.
Go ahead.
So just for anybody who's watching, I think, because I'm still determining what future topics for Culture Club will be, and I want to schedule them out. And I think one of them it would be great to have a conversation specifically about what the youth power building, connecting youth to leadership. What are the ways in? If they don't exist, how can we create them? And so just making it, like saying it out loud so that if anybody is interested in that conversation who's listening or is on this call, get in touch with me because we can start planning for that conversation. Go ahead, Lindsey.
Yeah, no, I was, two things actually now, because that last comment inspired me. I've been really excited to see the youth stepping up recently, mostly on social media, just because of the circumstances with different activist groups in terms of politics. I know there's actions over hashtags and Vote for the Valley. And so I see that we have some real leadership just kind of organically bubbling up. So this might be some great, student voices to pull into future conversations. In addition, in terms of like the mentoring and what we know our students need here, we also have really great opportunities for partnerships between our high schools and our community college and expanding at Davis, they have what's called middle college, or other agreements where students can start taking college courses when they're still in high school. When you don't have a parent to ask how to fill out the FAFSA or how to navigate the system, if you can do that, in an environment when you're still in high school and you have mentors along the way, you're much more likely to dive in. And then on the financial side of it, there's even students who are graduating from high school with their AA degree already completed in certain areas, areas similar to ours. In fact, Bakersfield Community College has some services. So I think we should look at expanding that in our community. And then also at the community college level, provide the wraparound services. Like I know Juan was talking about, mental health and housing and food insecurity. If that's what our community needs and our institutions are, public education, whether it be, K-12 or community colleges, if that's what our students need to get the skills they need to get that hand up, not a handout, then we need to find out what those are, and we need to step out of the silos, like Jocelyn said, and work to empower our students.
I also want to recognize that, I was a really shy kid, when navigating college, when you're first gen and your parents don't speak the language, it really is super hard to figure that out, right? And then figuring out FAFSA and asking your parents to give you their social security number is like crazy. Because they're like, what are you doing with it, And so, and then, I went to Stan State and I almost failed out my first semester. I wasn't ready. And, I had a counselor, I was an EOPS student, and the counselor said, you're going to fail out. And who I am, I'm like, oh, really? Challenge me? Watch, I'm not. And so, yeah, I made it, right? But even when I graduated, I was so quiet. I was, didn't have confidence, didn't know anybody. And I work there now, so I know that's still the same. And so a lot of these mentorship programs are also developed for leaders, right? People that have, that show initiation, that we see as like, oh, this person's like bright and they're going to be great. They're going to be a leader. And so if you would have, 20 years ago looked at me, you wouldn't think that again, leader, whatever that looks like, that I would be at the table. And so I think sometimes we have to also acknowledge, you have to do the work in the communities that need it the most to provide access, again, where you're going into the community of maybe the airport neighborhood, West Modesto, South Modesto, and your mentors show up, right, at the school. It's a trusted space You can't just go in as a nonprofit and be like, we're here to provide mentorship. That doesn't work in underserved communities and immigrant communities, right? They have a mistrust of government and agencies, and you know, if you're undocumented, you're not going to want to sign up for things, and they don't know what mentorship is, right? A lot of them didn't have mentors. Like I don't know, like our culture is Latinos is like, you work hard, and you either work hard or you don't make it. And so I think we also have to acknowledge that there is a gap of understanding of what I'm going to say, like an educated person thinks of mentorship, and then what's real and what's really needed in the actual communities. And so like, it's like, you can't just be like, oh, we provide mentorship for everybody, and then not really take the time to understand who you're trying to get at the table. It can't just be the kids from Modesto High that are I'm making stuff up, but whatever the AP program is or whatever, you know, or the Fremont Open Plan kids that are now at Davies, right? They already have access. They probably have awesome parents. Like I know my kid, like I'm a graduate, we have good jobs, like her life is going to be so vastly different because I'm going to be like, yeah, here's how you go to college. But then like, again, so many in our community don't have access to that, don't know who to go to, are very quiet, like are shy, and they're the ones falling through the cracks. And that's what we need to talk about and what we need to change.
There's two things that you said, Karhla, that I kind of wanted to pick up on. And the first is this idea around, you know, you mentioned how the system identifies leaders and and then how they pull them up or lift them up and push them along. And the way you described it, I think is accurate in that we look at the people who are the loudest and sort of sound smart, and we say, okay, yeah, like that's a leader, so let's lift them up. And you're missing people who aren't the loudest, who aren't sort of thoughtful and empathetic and listeners and all these things that are harder to observe. And so as we talk about what does leadership look like, what type of leadership do we want to see in the community, I think we all have to be cognizant that it doesn't look the way we've traditionally looked at it. And so we have to start identifying those more subtle ways that leadership shows up and then start lifting that up. And then actually the other point I definitely wanted to get back to was Lindsey. I think it was Lindsey who started the idea of, or actually maybe it came from Abel, but people who don't ask for mentorship or don't seek it out, and that the leaders have to initiate it. And there's something that deeply embedded, especially as a Black man, as Black people, but then additionally as Hispanic people and a lot of people of color who have been oppressed and throughout the history of this country. And to expect people who have been oppressed by a system to then go ask for help from that system is insane. And so that cannot be the way we expect it to work. It has to be the systems that evolve and turn around and say, hey, like, we recognize you don't trust us, you don't believe us, you're scared of us. And so we have to do the work to be better, to earn your trust and to be welcoming to you and invite those questions. So yeah, so I wanted to highlight that as well.
I appreciate what everyone is saying, because I think being someone who grew up, Karhla, you mentioned Latino, you listen, you do what you're told, especially as a woman growing up in a Latino household. And that combined with, I think, recognizing what you all are saying about we have to step up. I'm definitely an introvert. I would describe myself as that. But I think recognizing that we can take leadership roles that change the narrative and change how, even like you said, Juan, we see people, even if they're not directly mentors to you, they're mentors in a way and role models. I think it's key, and there are people in this group who have, inspired me. And I wouldn't say, I say I'm younger because I don't feel very young, but for me to run for office and to really be able to lean on all of you and the people in our communities, it's not, I think people were asking, where can we find these community groups? It's not easy. We definitely have to put in the work to go seek them out, but then it points to the fact that it's also missing. So we have a lot of work to do as leaders and also for people who want to step up as leaders.
We do have one comment that is relevant to Rachel, to what you just shared. So we had a comment or a question from Annalisa Freitas that says, she's a new resident in Modesto. Where should I be going if I want to understand the landscape of community movement in our city? How do I see what's already moving so I can join efforts or start my own without being duplicative? And that's a very good question, because I can't think of an answer to it.
When I first came to Modesto and I wanted to think about joining a community organization, I didn't know really what I was interested in or how I wanted to help. And I started off by just visiting groups and getting to learn about them, and then finally making a decision on what group fit my needs. And that's pretty much how I began to find out about different organizations.
Annalisa, you are not a new resident. You're just coming back. So I just want to put that out there because I know Annalisa, and she's a change agent, right? So that's just a perfect project, right? I always thought like the community foundation could have all the links to all the nonprofits and all the groups, but it's a lot of work because there's always new groups coming up, right? And depending on the audience. So like at MJC, when you're a student, the chances are you're going to get in a club at JC, or if you're at Stan State or your school, depending on like where you're at, you're going to find those things, right? So like so many things that I've learned is through Instagram, that someone sends me a message and they're like, hey, I really like what you had to say. Like I'm, starting this women's tech maker event, and I'm like, I don't know anything about technology, but I'll totally meet with you and have lunch, And so again, being vulnerable and providing access and sticking outside our comfort zones, right? Because I'm like, I am not an IT person, but I'm like, what do you want to do? You want to connect more women to IT? Oh, okay, awesome. Do you know, I see that Dave Darmstadler put a question about mentorship, but it's like, do you know this person? Do you know this person? And my bio says like, my favorite thing is connecting others to other people. I love hearing people's passion, their story, and then being like, you should know Rachel, you should know Reggie. There are people that are wanting to make change. And it's really about making those connections. And so it is hard though, as a new person, to come into this town and feel like, where do I go? Like there is really no place for people of you kind of have to like search it on your own, which is really, really a shame, because I think that there should be like a one-stop shop to be like, you want to get involved in community, here it is. So Annalisa, I'm going to tell you, like, make it happen.
You can run for office. That's how I got really involved. Somebody called me and said, do you want to run for school board? And I said, I have been thinking about that because I want to make some change. And so I wanted to step up and make some change. And through just making that decision, I've met some really great people. I mean, I met Lindsey and Kate before this, just really from running for office and doing the things that I needed to kind of get that going. So you want to just step out of your comfort zone a little bit and run for office. And local, we definitely need more of that. And you get to meet so many wonderful leaders and people in our community that start to get, and I just have to tell you, talking with a lot of you today and some of you before has really changed the outlook of what I think that my professional career is going to go in, or where I see my future going. So it's really, really struck a chord in my life, and where I could help in my community and the people that are around me. So I think one way to do that, obviously, is just get involved, either by running for office or politically involved, and you're going to meet a lot of people that way.
I know some of us are keeping an eye on the chat, and I just love that Annalisa said, "Oh, it's happening." So she's on her way. And I also just feel like I want to lift up. So it sounds like Jenny Canoyer is also paying attention, and she is like lifting up a lot of what we're saying. City Councilwoman for Modesto, wanting more younger people, more diverse group of people to get involved in local politics, and said that she'd be willing and interested in mentoring folks. And I just like, I don't know Jenny super well, but I think that's precisely what we were saying before, is you reach in grab somebody or more than one person and pull them up. Like we need people to be doing that. So yeah.
Totally agree.
Thanks for sharing that comment, Kate. And we had just one more, I think, question from a David Darmstandler about mentorship programs and why they may fizzle out locally. And if anybody has any like final thoughts about that, Juan.
Yeah, I'll chime in really quickly. As someone who just developed a youth program alongside somebody else, I know the struggle for the organization I was working for was funding, and that's all it was tied to, is just like funding. I helped write a grant for $40,000, a 2-year $40,000 grant, and it helped pay for stipends for youth, trips, and the program. But after the 2 years, I don't know if the organization was committed. And so I think but I mean, Anna Talavera could give us some more details on that. But I mean, I think that was the biggest fight I had in making the organization itself commit to developing out and continue the program after the financial grant was over.
Yeah, I have current live experience in that realm as well. And so, to Annalise's question, I started to build a platform, Modesto in Action, and still up and live, modestoinaction.org. And it is precisely to answer that question. If you want to get involved locally, what do you do? How do you do it? And so, I start to build out this platform, and it's like, okay, this is great. I know it's gonna solve a lot of problems for a lot of people and help people get involved. I need money to sustain it. And as I started to go to businesses primarily and say, hey, this is the type of community we say we want to live in, I think there's an expressed coalescing around how we think we get there and what type of leadership will get us there. So there's alignment in a lot of ways. When you have the question, I need $10,000 from you to make this happen, all of a sudden things get really problematic for one reason or another. And so that really goes back to Juan's point around, if we're going to make any of this happen, the people who have the power and maybe even more expressly, the people who have the money need to sort of step up and give and allow these things to happen and allow people to make a living for these things to happen, not expect people to do it and sacrifice their livelihoods, their prime earning years and things of that nature. Like, if people with money and power are going to have a little less of it if we want to be the world that we want to be. And that's what it boils down to.
So that's where my opinion of the philanthropy, those foundations need to be more versed on diversity and more willing to reach out and give money to diverse groups, because it's very difficult for us to get money from foundations.
Yeah, I really want to lift up and even maybe anchor what's being said, that there are lots of ways that we can make things happen and sustain things, but as a community, we're making a value statement based on what we resource. And if we believe that the kinds of things we're talking about matter to us, whether it's a mentorship program or civic engagement or, the vibrancy stuff, like, I mean, I'm biased, but Mod Shop, Porch Fest, like the things I do in my spare time. And we have this continued expectation that people are going to do this because it's the right thing to do, or because they're just really giving people who volunteer. But if we value it, we need to resource it. That's bottom line. That's about sustainability.
I also think with mentorship programs, like I've, been like, oh, I'll be a mentor, and then the students don't show up, right? Yeah. And as a busy professional, like I hate saying that word, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'll do whatever works for you. I'll make that happen. And so then sometimes as a mentor, you're like, well, I was trying to show up, and then they didn't want to show up. So then, then you're like, okay, what do you do then? And so I think it's got to be mentees and mentors have to understand the roles, right? And so again, if you're a mentor and you want to mentee someone and you get someone that's very introverted, they might be scared to talk to me, right? And so it's really like my role as a mentor to be like, I'm here, hey, just check it in, make sure that we're connecting. And I think as you become more professional or a leader, that you're like, well, now I'm disappointed because I really wanted to help, but it doesn't seem like that works. And so I think that's what happens with mentorship programs. I know SCO had like 6 cups of coffee and you know, and you do all, and they're trying so hard to provide these mentorship opportunities, but then they do fizzle because, you know, there is like the money's not there to make it like a viable program. It's usually one person organizing the whole program. And so then it's like they get burnt out and then they leave and then someone else starts over again. And it's not really unfair to like, you know, I've worked in nonprofits that you're trying to also like rise yourself and you work for a nonprofit that is getting funding, but then they don't value you because maybe you're a person of color or because you don't have a doctorate or all these things, right? And so nonprofits are really what changes communities. But if they're not being funded, if it's really like a grassroots one person man show, it's exhausting and people don't last, right? They are like, okay, I need to move on to something else that makes more money, whether or not your heart's in it. So I think the programs fail, again, back to the resources, the money, the commitment, that it isn't just a one person, you know, whether it's the district or the city schools, like it's gotta be bigger than one person if you really want it to be successful.
I also, so Karhla, the thing that really arose for me when you were talking, which Julie Susser sort of said something about it came up in the chat about being rooted in a savior mentality and misses the mark, that's part of the design issue too, that we've decided and prescribed the way in which mentorship is supposed to look. And when the mentee doesn't receive it in the way we've designed it, we decide that it's their failure to engage or their failure to show up. And that goes back to sort of my point around like being curious around what works in a human-centered way, right? On behalf of the person whose lives we're trying to impact. We get so stuck in deciding that something needs to be a certain way because it's always been that way, or that's what we think works. We have all the data in the world that's telling us it is not working. And we have this refusal to adapt, to learn and adapt. And so that's just super alive for me as you're talking, Karhla, like we need to resource what matters. And we also need to learn and adapt. What we think works, if they're telling us it doesn't, we need to be doing differently.
Right, I'm gonna step in and say I think that we're getting close to time for wrapping up, and I want to give each person a chance to give a final call to action, or if there's one thing that you want to say to people who may be listening, say it now, and also information about how to connect with each of you on social media or offline or through email. How can people find more information about you? Start with Kate.
Surprise. Reggie's happy that I'm going first this go around. I just want to, I'm so profoundly grateful to you, Desiree, for convening this group. I think we need more conveners who disrupt in the way that you do. And I think it just really matters that people can have these kinds of conversations. I also just want to express some gratitude to everybody on the call. I haven't met some of you. I look forward to lightweight harassing you a little bit when this is over, but I'm also just really proud of the people who I do know and the work that's already happening. I have a website, you can visit it. Be very happy to connect with anyone. I think my work is in helping people get unstuck, and we are stuck, I think, individually, collectively. Very happy to have any conversation that's wanting. And I think I would just like to anchor what I said at the beginning, which is we need to keep talking about this. Like, we just can't wait for a crisis to push us back into this moment. Like we just have to keep it alive.
And Kate's website is katetrompeter.com.
And Desiree designed it and it's gorgeous.
Yes. Lindsey, would you like to go next?
Sure. Desiree designed my website, and Kate introduced me to her. So, this networking thing, it's real. But again, thank you, Desiree. This has been amazing. Not only, the conversations here, but I've got my phone and I'm watching who's watching and the reactions, and it's just exactly what we need in this moment. So thank you. This is amazing. I think for me, I would love to encourage people, to do what you can on each level. I know we talked a lot about leadership and mentorship, but even everyday moments, leaning in on holding people accountable with what they say, especially not just our elected officials, but people in our life in terms of how we value one another, bleeds into how we act and how we vote. So, especially as a white person, I know it's important to make sure that we're holding each other accountable. So whether, however you're comfortable doing that. I mean, I encourage people to be disruptive of the status quo, because at the end of the day, we've all agreed that we have a lot of work to do here in our community. If you're interested in getting to know about my campaign for community college, you can visit. My website is birdforboard.com, and you can email me at lindsey@birdforboard.com. I would love all input I can hear. Obviously, my students' experience has really motivated me to be part of the change, but I realize that some of the barriers they faced are barriers that other people in our community have been facing literally for generations. And so, in the spirit of lifting each other up, I really feel that education is one of many ways to do that. And I hope that if I am elected, that I'm able to connect with people from all different sectors of the community to make the words that we talked about today become reality for the students and the people in our community. So thank you again for inviting me. And I hope to not only see and hear from all of you on this panel, but all of you in the chat that are providing such great input. Thank you guys for tuning in as well.
Thank you, Lindsey. Karhla?
I think final words are show up, be brave, be courageous. You have people, whether you know them or not, are your allies. And so it's really about that. And you can find me, I'm on Instagram, con corazon with the K. My name is spelled different. I was going to say funny, but I'm trying to own the way that my name is spelled. It's Karlha, Karhla. So con corazon with a K. I don't have a website. I'm a hustler, and again, my favorite thing is to connect you. I know everyone up here except for Abel, but I'll get his information. So I'm your person if you want to be like, how do I get this person? And again, just show up as yourself, show up to be like what you believe in, because there is community here that wants change, that is willing to have those uncomfortable conversations with you. And they'll show up, they really will. And I know because they've shown up for me. And so many on the panel have done that. And I'm always like, I can't believe it. Again, back to the unworthiness, like who am I to know these people, or who am I to be at this table? But I'm trying to connect with more people that I don't know, that have passion, that have heart, and younger people, because we're kind of like the older people now. We're the adults, and it's kind of scary because I don't think myself that way, but but we're part of the change. And I think like Kate, to echo what Kate said, is we need to just acknowledge that, like, we have to change it, and it can't be because of a pandemic. This has just shifted us to be like, oh, we need to connect now on Zoom virtually to have these conversations where they were more hidden before. I think this is like such a good outlet that it's like, we're here, we're behind you, and there's so many more. Thank you.
Abel, you're up.
Yeah, so vote and get other people registered to vote, and have other people vote that can and that are, that have the ability to do it. Because as you see today, a lot of decisions that, Karhla had mentioned, like her parents, they're trying to make it day by day, working class. Well, who's going to most affect those working class day by day? What I'm doing here is your local officials, the local people that you elect around you. Yeah, we have, voting for president, voting for senators, but really what's going to change your life at this moment, it's going to be the people that you elect here around our community. And so get, if somebody says to you, oh, well, I don't like either of the candidates, then my question would be, well, which school board candidate do you like then? Because they're not talking about that, right? They're talking about the big election, when really there should be more of a focus on our community and the elected officials that we are elected, because those are the change makers in terms of how our police are run. Those are the change makers of how our schools are run, and what affects our day-to-day life in the city that we live in. So vote, get people registered to vote, get them out to vote, get them to make sure that they vote by mail, or however they're going to vote this time, this crazy year around. So that's my last thought. And I just want to say again, thank you for allowing me to sit at this table today and talk about just stuff that just I really believe a lot of us are passionate about. So thank you again.
Thank you, Abel. Would you share how we can stalk you online?
I'm sorry, I forgot about that. So my website is ableformcs.com, that my campaign website, which I was lucky enough to not have to technically have a campaign because I was running unopposed. So I will be on the Modesto City School Board, which is exciting, but there's still a website because I created it. So you can get contact me through there, or you can even just learn more about me on my website. I'm also on Twitter at @MyEstisTeach. So @MyEstisTeach on Twitter. And I'd love to just to hear from people.
Thank you. Thanks. Juan?
Okay, so in wrapping up, I think I have a few thoughts. We were talking about radical honesty, right? And I think Big Ag was brought up. And when I think about Big Ag, I think about how MID is subsidizing farmers, right? But yet farm workers are underpaid. I think that's a huge issue, and that needs to be addressed. Secondly, the environment. The environment's super key for me. I love my river, the Tuolumne River. Karhla also worked for the Tuolumne River Trust at one point. And I don't know, I found an extreme love for the river, connecting people to the nature through our river. And water issues are super important. Water issues are going to be some of the biggest fights that we have coming in the future. And they already are starting. And so with that, I kind of want to create a future department with either the county or the city called the Department of Equity and the Environment that would kind of just review how cities are, or our city or our county is allocating resources and looking out for our environment. Number 3, I'm starting my own business. I need funds. I'm also looking at loans. So if you want to connect with me, learn more about our social entrepreneurship, connect by following me on Instagram, Onethelles, ONETELLES. You can also find me on Facebook here, and I also have a website for the business that's getting started, cafecolibri.community. So thank you. It was magical to be on this call with all of you guys on this panel to talk about leadership. So many big things. I love y'all.
Love you back.
Thank you, Juan. Rachel?
Yeah, I'm so excited to see where these conversations lead, but to also apply pressure to us to keep them going, so we can create this culture where funding and priorities and being informed about trauma and culture all intersect. And I think maybe that's what's missing. And yeah, so I am running for city council in Riverbank. And you can reach me at Rachel4 with the number 4 Riverbank on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, or email me at Rachel, RACHEL, @riverbanknow.com. And so I guess to my peers and then to people that are younger and slightly older, to be able to work together and really connect the way, you know, everyone here is. So I'm excited to see that.
Thanks, Rachel. Reggie?
Thank you again, Desiree. This was outstanding. Thank you to everybody else who was on this call. You're all amazing people. And actually, I didn't sort of put it together until just the last couple of minutes that there are 4 people on here who are epitomizing this idea that I wanted to call out, which is say yes. Right? Like anytime you get an opportunity to contribute, to do something, to meet, like Karhla's been saying, meet somebody for coffee. Like when you say yes, it's more than you say no. There's like beautiful things tend to happen. So say yes. And I saw recently somebody mentioned this idea of yes if as opposed to no because. So even if there are barriers or obstacles, like it's a barrier and obstacle, but overcome it. And it's a yes if. Right, so start with that, and then I just want to double, triple, quadruple down on Abel's point. Like, you have to vote, and And there's a conversation that, you know, I voted before, nothing's changed. Like, voting isn't the end of the conversation, but it's the beginning of the conversation. Like, you have to vote. Lives literally depend on it. And if they don't in your circle, that is privilege. So you have to vote. The candidates are not the same. Like, you cannot convince me that the candidates are the same. So if they are the same, you run, right? Like, those are your options: run or pick a candidate. So I'll leave it with that. But thank you, everyone.
And Reggie, can you share how to find you?
Yes, engage Reggie on social media. Engage Reggie. And then I mentioned the website, modestoinaction.org. If you check that out, there's some guidance on how to get involved and navigate some of the issues as they arise over time.
And Jocelyn?
Well, I can be reached many different ways. I'm part of the Peace Life Center. So you can go on the Peace Life Center Facebook page or website. I'm also the development director for the community radio station. So if somebody wants to learn how to be a programmer or get involved in the radio, please call me or go to that website. I'm on the West Modesto Community Collaborative Board. And lastly, I'm on the Dr. Parker Committee, or Parents Leading Change. And if you notice, every organization is my passion: social justice, media, education. But the fastest way to reach me, and I don't have a problem, I give out my personal email, which is my name, Jocelyn Cooper, 2012 @gmail.com. And my cell phone number is 209-422-0119. I used to be protected, but so many people know that number now, just forget it. It's available. And you may call me anytime. I really don't know how to, I have to say to Reggie, I don't know how to say no. That's my problem. I pretty much always want to help someone.
So thank you so much, everybody, for saying yes to this conversation and for trusting the process and each other. I feel really honored to have witnessed the things that you have shared today, and excited for what comes next, and want to encourage everyone who's listening to follow these people and also run for office,
Yes.
as Reggie has suggested, and vote and do all of the things. Like there's a call to action. These are your homework assignments.
Mm-hmm.
These are your takeaways. So like, go forth and conquer and build community. And I'll see you all next time.
Yes.
Okay, I've stopped the live feed.